My name is Alicia Wright, and I've been writing young adult comic fantasy for over 10 years now. I got my contract back in 2010, so it will be 10 years. Oh, no, it is 10 years. It's 2021 now. Yes, 10 years. Goodness me. Anyway, I'll shut up. Well, I won't shut up. I've got writing tips to tell you. The most common question that writers get asked is, where do you get your inspiration? And the answer is everywhere. I presume since you're here that you have story ideas already. But if you don't, anything can be inspiration. You can just, maybe sometimes you suddenly get an idea from seeing something out the window, or a strangely shaped cloud, or a tree, or a rabbit, or anything. But you can also force it. You can sit down and think, okay, I want to write about mermaids. What kind of story do I want about mermaids? Maybe I don't want the typical romance type thing. Maybe it's like more of a horror thing. Maybe mermaids are scary monsters that are at war with humans. Or maybe they're just a lot more alien than the typical romantic story. Or maybe you do want to go with the typical romantic story, but you're thinking, oh well, how am I gonna do that? What I tend to do is to sort of spider diagrams out. So I'm like, okay, mermaids. How am I going to do the mermaids? Okay, I'm going to do it like this. Okay, why are the mermaids like that? And just keep building it up. There's this idea that writers are inspired all the time, and it's not true. Sometimes you just have to make your own inspiration. You don't have to wait for inspiration to strike. You can make it happen yourself, and in fact, this is how it works most of the time. So once you do have ideas, what do? I was asked once, so I have a setting and characters, but I don't know what to do with them. What do I do? When you're in that situation, you sort of need to think, well, why? First, I just need to explain basic story structure. This is really, really basic. Obviously, start with your who and your where. Who are the characters? Where are they? Literally start with your characters and setting. And then you generally want to introduce a problem. If we take Northern Lights, or as you might know it, the Golden Compass as an example, we start off with Lyra and Pantalaimon, and they are on their way to the retiring room where they shouldn't be. So our problem is that she's somewhere she shouldn't be, and she gets trapped in there, and we're like, oh gosh, what's gonna happen if she's discovered? And then she is discovered, and then it becomes a different problem because she's now spying, and she still needs to not be discovered, but by different people. And then they introduce the problem of the wine. And once you've introduced your problem, you need to introduce a solution, or at least a hunt for a solution. Like, many problems won't be solved right away, and in fact it's irritating if they're solved too quickly. And a story is generally a progression of problems and solutions. A way that you can think about what kind of problems your characters might have is if you think about why. Like, be the naughty child, going, why? You know the ones. When they ask you, why is a thing, and you explain the thing, you're like, but why is that thing? Like, why does it rain? Well, the water gets evaporated, and it goes up into the air, and it becomes clouds, and then it comes down again. Why? Because science? Why? Yeah, be the naughty child. Ask yourself why the characters have the motivations that they do. Ask, why is the world like it is? For example, with Miss Prince, that's how I ended up getting my plot. I had exactly that problem. I had this idea of a girl being a prince and working for an agency to fix stories, but I had no plot because I had no why. Well, why is the agency set up? Well, it's because in this world, people believe stories should go a certain way. And an additional why, because it's a cover for a rebellion. Why does Lucinda want to do this job when it's kind of dangerous sometimes? Because she's got no money. Also, because she's a weeb, and dressing up and fighting monsters is something that she thinks is really cool. Why? Why do my characters want this? Another thing I think happens to amateur writers is they give up too quickly. I have 9 unfinished manuscripts on one of my old laptops, and it is because I did not know this one very important thing. You will get to a point in your manuscript where you hate it. Where you absolutely hate it. You can't think that anyone would want to read it. You can see all these problems and errors and just lack of character development or plot development or huge plot holes, and you're like, oh no, it sucks. What am I gonna do? No, I should just throw the whole thing out and start again. I should throw it out and start again. Don't do that. That will happen to you every time. At least it happens to me every time, and I didn't know that it happened to other people. I thought I just sucked. and it's not just me. It's I did NaNoWriMo in 2007, and that's when I wrote the first draft of EBSD, and I was sort of at that point, but soldiering on because I was doing NaNoWriMo. If you haven't heard of it, it's National Novel Writers Month, which is every November. You have to write a novel that's 50,000 words or more, and you start it on the 1st of November, and you have to finish it by the 30th of November. And that is the thing. And that was really helpful for me. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. But they sent out these emails that were like writing tips and things. One of them talked about this problem that you're gonna hate it at some point, halfway through, 3/4 of the way through. You're just gonna hate it. And it happens to everyone. You have to write past that. You have to keep going. You may slow to a crawl. Maybe you'll be writing a tiny bit. It's just like, it sucks and I don't know what I'm doing and it sucks and I hate it. But you have to keep going. There'll be a point where you're like, oh, actually this is okay and I've thought of the solution to this thing and this thing and this thing. And then you can go back and fix it on your second draft. First drafts suck. They always suck. Just don't worry about it. They always suck. It's a very rare first draft that's a gem with no plot holes or errors or anything. This is advice I can apply to your writing in general. Just keep going, keep learning, and you'll get better at it. It's a craft. You have to hone it. You're not gonna be very good right away. Maybe you are, and that's awesome. It's like drawing. Some people are better at drawing right away than other people, but if you improve, if you work at it, and you'll improve. Just keep at it. Just don't give up. That is always the advice that I give above all else, is just don't give up. Keep at it. It will get better. So once you have a first draft, I suggest that you leave it alone. You just need to put it away and shove it in a drawer for at least a couple of weeks until it's new to you again. It needs to become new to you so that you'll find the errors more easily. Another thing that you need is beta readers. Get someone else to read it. It can be tough to find beta readers. You can generally find other writers who are interested in finding a beta reader themselves. So what I do is I swap with other writers so that I beta read for them, they beta read for me. And that's really helpful because other people will point out stuff that you don't notice because you're too close to the story. Because you're like, well, of course that makes perfect sense. And someone else reads it and goes, why is this thing like this? That doesn't make any sense. You're like, no, it makes oh, wait, no. Actually, no, you're right. The biggest mistake I made when I was younger was not doing that. Because I was like, well, obviously I wrote it perfect the first time. There's nothing I could improve. I think another pair of eyes is a very good idea. Particularly because I have a form of dyslexia, which sort of messes with my logic a little bit, and sometimes some other stuff in my writing that, like, it means that sometimes I don't make sense when I'm writing, and it definitely helps. And you are gonna go through a lot of edits. Like, a lot. I think the least edits I've managed to get away with is 8. So I've had 8 drafts as a bare minimum, but normally they go to 11, 12, 13 drafts, 14 drafts. Like, I have drafts that are like, the final one. The final real final one. I've foolishly called my file, EBSD final draft or something, and I'm like, EBSD final draft post formatting. EBSD final draft post formatting 2. EBSD final draft post formatting 2B. And it's like, no, just no. No. Keep going. Having said that, there is a point where you have to leave it alone. I have had drafts where I've just redone them for minor nitpicky things, and I think there's always going to be some things that are going to bug you. You can't get it 100% perfect for yourself. There's always going to be something that's bugging you. It's like a tiny thing. There is a point where you have to leave it alone. So do bear that in mind as well. Also, don't make the mistake of sending it to your beta readers before you have taken out as many errors and plot holes and things as you can. Because Speaking as a beta reader, it makes it harder work than it needs to be. Don't make things hard work for your beta readers. Do all the work that you possibly can first, and then send it to your beta readers. Never send beta readers a first draft. Never do that. You need to wait till the third draft minimum. Like, if you're making it hard work for your beta readers to read through your manuscript, you're gonna lose beta readers pretty quickly. No one's gonna want to beta read for you if they're rooting out like a million grammar errors and a million plot points, because it takes time to stop and write notes. Like, the less notes they have to write that you could have fixed, the better. Another tip is do your research. Do research on a bunch of stuff, really. Sometimes it can be frustrating because you do a load of research and then you use like maybe one line of like in your book that's research, but people will notice if you're just making stuff up. It really breaks the immersion and it's not great. Also, it can just give you really good ideas. A chapter in Folklore in the Sea about buried pirate treasure, and I was like, this is awfully exciting. I should write something about pirates and treasure, and it's not my normal genre of thing, so I combined that with an earlier idea I had about mermaids and a war, and there's always a war. There's always a war in my books. I think I blame it on stuff like growing up playing Suikoden and Shining Force. But yeah, you can get story ideas from research as well, plus it's just more realistic. Like, for example, if you're trying to figure out how your dragons work, maybe you should look something up about fire, or like something that moves like a dragon. Maybe you could look up about lizards or snakes or birds, something that you can take and incorporate it into your lore to make it seem more realistic rather than just making stuff up out of nowhere and having people think, well, like, wouldn't it, like, that's not very realistic, wouldn't it just explode or something? If you've ever seen Flight of Dragons, which is a cartoon I grew up raised on, essentially, that was a combination of two different books, but the Flight of Dragons book was not actually the cartoon. It was a thesis on how dragons could have actually functioned. It's actually really interesting. I don't know where it is. I hope I still have it somewhere. Another thing that you need to do is just read fiction as well. You have to read. Trying to write without reading anything is like trying to draw without looking at any art or references. You need to see how other people do it so that you can learn. And you should read outside your genre because you come back with more experience than just reading in your same genre all the time. Because you learn how other sorts of stories function, and that's always helpful. Another thing I would say is that you should review things. I find it very helpful in reviewing things to think about, well, why do I like this? Or why do I not like this? Sometimes I read popular things that I don't think I'm going to like, just because, well, why is it popular? And why don't I like it, even though it's popular? Don't be too much of a snob when things are like, when people say that things are bad. Sometimes, yes, they are terrible. But some people just hate things because they're popular, so do try and give some things a chance and try and see why, and then make up your mind based on your own opinion rather than someone told you it was terrible. I would say do also try and watch or read things that you don't think you'll like. Again, it's sort of like the reading outside your genre thing. You will come back with some tips and tricks that you otherwise wouldn't have. Sometimes in reviewing things, you will also come across a solution to a problem that you yourself are having that you've been having a hard time figuring out how to fix it. For example, when I was writing Vampires Don't Belong in Fairyland, my editor said, I'm having trouble connecting with Tyrion. And I was like, because the problem is, because he's been in the webcomic for a long time, my webcomic readers, some of whom are my beta readers, obviously they don't have any trouble because they already know him. So I was like, I don't know how to fix this. Then I watched a movie where I had trouble connecting to any of the characters, and in reviewing it, I figured out the reason was I did not know these characters at all because they were like fighting a magic war thing, but that was all they did. I didn't know anything about them beyond the fact that they were fighting this magic war. I couldn't string two sentences together about any of them because there was almost no character development. And I think I had a similar problem, I think, with Tyrion, that I didn't have enough character development in there. I would say character development is very important, because if I don't care about the characters, I'm not gonna care about the plot. Like, I don't care. I'm not gonna be invested. This was actually one of my major problems with a certain major book. I did not like the main character, therefore I didn't care. So, yeah. That's not to say that your characters have to be perfect and likable. Sometimes characters aren't likable, but they're interesting, and you sort of want to see how they deal with stuff. Like, for example, Seto Kaiba. I don't like him, but he's fun to watch. So, it's like, and it's fun to see how he deals with stuff, because he's different to our goody-goody protagonists. I mean, I guess that the other Yugi is not a goody-goody protagonist. He's kind of murdered people. But, you know, it's sort of like that contrast for when the other Yugi did stop murdering people. So we got Kaiba to do badass things instead. And I think, like, for example, in Dyslexia 3, I found the protagonist quite unlikable, but he had Almas and the other characters to balance him out. So even if you have an unlikable protagonist that by design they're just not a nice person, you can balance them out with other things. And some super basic advice that you'll find anywhere is that your scene should be plot, world building, or character development. I do have a fourth one, which is it funny? Because I write comedy. If it's not doing any of those things, then why is it there? And if you can't think of a good reason, then you should cut that scene. That's more of an editing thing. You really need to not get too carried away with your research and your world building, because you can end up just world building and researching forever and never getting your actual story down. It is often when you're writing your story that you will get the best ideas. That is my final piece of advice. Sit down and write the thing. Sit down and write it. Doing everything else is not writing it. Sit down and get it done. I would say the best way to do that is to try and write every day and set yourself a goal. Like, for example, the NaNoWriMo one was the 50,000 words in 30 days. So work that out. Be like, okay, I want this many words. I'm going to set myself this much time. So maybe I can aim for 1,000 words a day or 500 words a day, whatever's doable. And then make sure that you do that. You could write in your lunch break, or you could just decide where I come home and I write for an hour. Whatever it takes to just get you to that end goal. And that's about it. That's everything. Thanks for listening. I hope it was helpful. For more advanced tips, I would recommend highly Patricia C. Reed's blog, Read on Writing. That's also her book. Actually, I think that is her book. And I don't normally recommend what not to do lists or anything, because most of those are based on, like, just personal taste, or they don't really, I just don't think they're that helpful. But I do recommend the book How Not to Write a Novel. It gives you a lot of examples of what not to do, with examples in writing of why, and it's really funny, and I found it helpful. So I do recommend that for further information, for further advice. Thanks for listening. Have a good day, nerds.